Welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast. My name is Sara Vicente Barreto, and I'm your host. I'm a corporate strategist, problem solver, social entrepreneur, writer, mom of two, and passionate for growth, at home, in business, or in my community. I'm so happy to bring you my energetic guest today. I met Anais some 2 years ago, as she was first pitching for her business. We kept in touch, and after I became an angel investor last year, we stayed in close contact. I've been really amazed about her always fresh tone and perspective and figured she would be a great addition to the podcast. The Make Space for Good podcast amplifies the voices of women entrepreneurs and leaders, celebrating the strength and resilience it takes to thrive both in business and life. I believe women can be at the forefront of shaping industries with journeys of adaptability, bold decisions, and perseverance. This is a story to be heard and recognized. This podcast embraces the full self because the success extends through the professional and the personal. By sharing these stories, we hope to inspire and reshape the narrative around leadership. I now want to welcome Anais Cisneros to the podcast. Anais is a powerhouse in the technology and investment ecosystem with a career spanning consulting, venture capital, and entrepreneurship. As the founder and CEO of Amela, she leads Latin America's largest private network of women entrepreneurs in tech, now expanding into Europe. With experience at EWAR Berlin, Rallycap VC San Francisco, and Samas Investments in London, and as an active member of the VC Familia and Unlock VC, Anais is a true advocate for diversity in venture capital and a driving force for global innovation. Her voice is filled with passion and power. Let's dive in. Anais, welcome to the Make Space for Growth podcast.
Hi, super happy to be here.
So, Anais, before we talk about business, what was your favorite thing to do as a child and what did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, it's always hard to choose. I think it was reading. I've always been nowadays it's a little bit hard, like attention focus is lacking with the new generations, but back then there was not so much distraction, so I love to read. I've reflected a little bit about the whys, and I think it's because I grew up in Peru. And Peru is like a great place, but it's also a little bit disconnected from like the global scene. And I felt like through books, I was able to go to different places. Like suddenly I was in the Philippines, like in the jungle, or I was in New York. I was in like so many places. So it really helped me understand people at a global scale and just have different exposure. And then in terms of, because I think you said, like, what did I like?
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, a businesswoman.
Spot on.
Yeah. I used to think that because my mom is an entrepreneur. So I thought, okay, I have to be a businesswoman. Ideally, an international businesswoman. I didn't really know the word entrepreneur. So I just thought I'm going to be a businesswoman and like negotiate with people and like have interesting conversations and sell stuff. And like that was kind of the goal.
So I guess you're on the right track for that, for fulfilling childhood dreams. And Anais, you have a very diverse background, and me and you have talked about this, that you sometimes people think you've gone the other way because you started in consulting, then you went to venture capital, venture partner, and before we talk about the entrepreneurship part, let's look at that period. How did those experiences prepare you for becoming an entrepreneur after that?
Yeah, I think it's quite funny because like I think I did every possible job before becoming an entrepreneur. I just felt like I was always preparing. And looking back, yes, of course I took some things. Like from consulting, I took the structure and being able to problem solve. From being an operator at a couple tech companies, I learned that I could actually do it myself. At some point, I was a chief of staff, which is basically a not so well compensated co-founder, just because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do stuff. And then later on, like the venture capitalist thing wasn't really my plans. It actually happened after my first startup. But it came because I realized I needed to understand the incentives and what makes a company successful, what makes it fail, how do you find the financing, all of those things. So in a way, yes, everything contributed to me learning better things, but I also don't think you have to do all the jobs before you become an entrepreneur. Like you will always face challenges and try and figure it out. And I think like whatever you do in your life will contribute to that. It can definitely add, but it's also not necessarily like a must. And I think that's not something that I learned until later on. Like no matter how many jobs you do, like you will still face challenges.
You will
So
never
you keep
know.
learning and then figure it out.
And so you had all this preparation and probably as much as you can get, despite knowing that that might not always be sufficient. And then you felt inspired and moved to co-found Amela. How did those experiences link into you saying, right, this is the company I'm going to create?
Yeah, so I never thought, oh, I will, build a company to support entrepreneurs. I thought I was just going to build a fintech, which was initially my first business. But I think through all of those experiences, like being initially a consultant in all of these boardrooms and realizing I was like one of the only women. But back then, kind of rationalizing it and saying, oh, that's because I'm a woman in finance and women don't like finance, so therefore I'm the only one. But then being an entrepreneur and realizing it was still the same thing, then being a venture capitalist and realizing that most of the teams would be like teams of Martins, as I call them, like just three Martins, whatever. Like having seen my mom like build a really big company or actually multiple companies, like I think I could see that unfortunately the situation hasn't necessarily changed. And like I do believe that a lot of women have great capacities, but I also like I'm certain that it's so much harder to become a successful entrepreneur as a woman that I just felt like I needed to do something about it. To make sure that people had access to network, to make sure that people had access to knowledge, that they could sort of shortcut some of those paths that I had been through or that I could see other people going through.
Yeah, so you started talking a little bit about the problem that you decided to solve, right? So do you want to share a little bit more about what Amela is trying to do and what its mission and what's the concept behind what you're trying to create?
100%. So Amela is a private network for aspiring and scaling entrepreneurs. It's mostly focused on supporting women, but it's not only for women. And so what I mean with that is, like, I actually have been telling people we basically increase people's chances of success. I think entrepreneurship is hard. And like having access to the right mentorship, having access to the right network, knowing how the venture capital game works, or if you don't want to raise capital and you just want to bootstrap, just having access to top knowledge, like can really sprint or leapfrog your success. And that's what we focus on doing. We do it through two different things. So on one side, we have courses, and those courses solve specific problems. So for instance, how to fundraise, and then we have a fundraising bootcamp, or how do I build my first MVP? And now with AI, you can actually build your MVP in 2 hours, but you still need a little bit of insights of how do you go about it, right? So that you don't spend all of your money hiring a developing company and you don't even know how to manage it or like what you're validating for. So that's on the courses side. And then for like long-term support, we have a membership that enables people to have access to mentorship, to top speakers, and also to gatherings like events. And I would say the cherry on top is community, like realizing that you're not the only one who's facing these challenges and figuring out how to solve them.
And I know that there's been some significant turns and pivots along the way. That's the famous name, and it's always easy for someone to look outside in and say, "Oh, that's great what Anais has done, and look at this, and it works so well." But I always like to also bring up there were times where you looked and you said, "You know what, this isn't working," and you did have a few big decisions. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe how you went through that process and how you faced that change as a founder? Or co-founder turned founder?
Yeah, so initially when we set up ourselves to do this, because initially I had a co-founder, we went under the belief of, hey, we have a really large community of women who were not paying, and maybe that's a specific, very important thing to mention, that we could help, and said, okay, we'll figure out a business model while at it. That being said, that's easier said than done. So I think the bigger realization there was that unfortunately there is just not enough women entrepreneurs to make a sustainable business out of that. So what I mean with that is, if you look at the stats, everyone knows the 2% of funding that goes to women founders, but then there is also that 17% of startups that have a woman in the co-founding team. So the pool comparatively is just a lot smaller. And then I think because many of these women face a lot of challenges, they're like cash strapped, like they have so many things happening. And so while going at it, we realized that we needed to prevent early death. And what I mean with preventing early death is making sure that we were there before, sometimes even before the woman actually takes the first step towards entrepreneurship, and kind of give her some insights of, hey, like if you're thinking about starting something, this is some of the skills that you should have. These are some of the people you should start getting to know. Like set yourself for success. And so that was like the first pivot of pivoting from just building a community for women founders to building a community for women founders and aspiring founders, which is a larger pool of people who potentially want to go into entrepreneurship and want to learn more about it. And then within that, we also recently made the pivot from being a community to being a network. And I think there is a very clear distinction to that, because whenever people think about community, as much as we like it, we think just about connection, but not necessarily structured connection. And I think the difference between a community and a network is being able to get tangible value out of it. And I think once you're able to prove tangible value to people, then you're also able to charge, which makes for a sustainable business. And that's what we currently are looking into. On top of that, we also realize that sometimes people need more structured support, not just, come as you go and get different things. And so that's how we ended up doing a lot of the courses. And within the courses, we felt like it was also good to have not just women joining them, but also like all types of genders, because in reality, knowledge should be there for the people who need it. And it can also make like the pool of the, let's say, main user of Amela, which are the women, like aim for higher, they start to compete a little bit better. So in that sense, in the courses, we have gender mixed balance, and we also enable people to have structured support. And then on the membership side, we have ongoing support for some of the needs that we found along the way working with different people. Maybe another thing to mention within that, because I think you talked a little bit about the hardships or the pivots and the things that had to change. At some point, my co-founder and I realized we had a different vision of what we wanted for each other's future. And it was really, really tough to realize that the person that you started something with is ultimately going to go a different way. And it even made me question, okay, do I really want to be doing this, right? Like, it seems like it's going to be such a hard journey. But I realized that we were up to something, that I was already having some customers paying, and that I could see like this being a long-standing institution that can support the next generation of founders, that I'm also extremely passionate about it, and that we can build a business out of it. So like, I think it's ironic, because so many times I also support many of the founders that go through this type of things. So now whenever I tell them, hey, you obviously want to have people who support you along the way and potential co-founders and many things. But I think it's important that, is this really what I want to commit myself to doing? And then you find people along the way. I also have a team, which is really wonderful. So many great investors who've been able to give me advice and support as I go. And I also don't necessarily close myself to the opportunity of potentially finding another partner for the business as I go along.
No, thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people do see that type of change as a little bit of the end. And I think you were able to reinvent it and actually found your own meaning and purpose and take the company to a different place, right? And not every, as you said, and with the examples you gave, not every journey is the same, but it is important for people to realize that it's sometimes it requires a little bit of thought, but it doesn't need to be the end of the original purpose. So Let's move into Anais, the CEO, right? I know you manage multiple hats, and we've spoken a little bit about it. How do you balance your time, overseeing the vision, the program development, the member acquisition, the team development, the community engagement, or the network development? How do you structure yourself to manage all this?
Yeah, I mean, I do carve out some time for myself to think. I think so many times we can just be forever in the doing. I've actually like managed to build a little bit of a healthy routine for myself along the way. So I still do exercise. I have a few people who are kind of like my informal board of advisors, my investors that I catch up with regularly to check on the vision. And then I've been able to delegate some of the work to my people. A little bit easier said than done sometimes because I am someone who loves doing stuff, right? Like I'm like, oh, I can fix this too. But the fact that I can do it doesn't mean that I'm the one that has to do it. So for instance, a very important, like, let's say a very important figure in our network is the ambassadors, because there's no way I'm going to be running every event in every city that we're present. And so being able to find people who really understand the vision of what we're building and also commit the specific timeframes for that has been a game changer for us. Same with the mentors, right? Like I could never tell people that at Amela, me or like my small team are gonna be able to solve every entrepreneur's questions or troubles. We're just facilitators. We should be able to provide a structure. But having added multiple mentors into the platform, both with like a specific skill set, like, oh, you're like the mentor who knows about financing, or you're the mentor who knows about marketing, or you're the mentor who knows about something specifically, or also mentors who've been entrepreneurs both on like the very successful end of, hey, I built a company to Series A and exited, or I actually bootstrapped my company into profitability, or actually I built a company and I had to shut it down. Like I think that really helps people get parallels of support, so it doesn't just have to be me. That being said, in lots of transparency, I'm still figuring it out. And I think I was also listening to this podcast by Emma Grede, who I actually found very refreshing because she talked about work-life balance and how people like kind of have this idea of someday I'll be super zen and I will have all of my chakras aligned and all of these things. We're always figuring it out, right? Like there are moments where you feel like, oh yes, I'm super healthy and I am managing to see all my friends, and then there are some moments where you just have to prioritize and you have to pull an all-nighter, let's say. It doesn't have to become the rule, but I do think that people tend to believe that we need to have everything perfect, and reality is it's very likely not gonna be that case.
Yeah, I think balance was not a very well chosen word when we first started talking about this, because balance means that there's things on opposite ends of the scale, right? And so I like to think more of it these days about work-life flow, and to really have things, ebbing and flowing between all of the worlds, because at the end it's not just life and work, because work is life and life is work. But it is definitely one of the challenges. And I think you've started answering my next question, but maybe you have some of them to add. What do you feel have been your biggest challenges you faced as you've built this business?
Yeah, that's something I need to think about. There have been multiple challenges, so I'm like, what's the biggest challenge? I think one of the biggest challenges is finding the right people to support me. Uh, and I think this is a very cliche answer for people like, oh, you need to find the right team, you need to find the right team. But it's one thing to know that you need to find the right team, and then another to feel that you need to find the right team. So I'm very happy with my team currently. I feel like we complement each other and they're like holding different parts of the business, but it wasn't always that case. And I'm also very well aware that people are there for a specific period of time and maybe then at some point transition. And then I will need to reshuffle stuff. But I think that's always a big challenge, just having the right people who both believe in the mission, but also have the right skills to fulfill whatever role we need at the moment. I think another challenge that I had initially is I feel like I wasn't asking for help enough, you know? And I think ironically, this is something I see a lot in like many entrepreneurs. They want to try and like carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. And they're like, I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, until you can't, right? And so, like, specifically becoming a solo founder made me realize that I do need to share that load. And if I need help, I need to actually shout to the people who are either my investors or my surroundings and say, hey, I need help with this. Can someone like orient me into the right space? So that's been super helpful. Like, I think we tend to underestimate how helpful people can be if you give them a specific direction, you know? If, like, for instance, the other day I posted, hey guys, like in my investor channel, I need help with email marketing. And then someone was like, you should talk to person blah. And then I had a chat with person blah. And now I have a way to fast track that part. Um, so yeah, I'm not sure if I've fully answered the question. I'm happy to
No, I
go
think you
deeper.
did, right? I think there's the people one that you say it's a little bit of a cliche is, I mean, it's a cliche because it is at the core of most businesses, right? And in the last podcast, we had the same conversation, and it was a totally different non-tech business. But at the end of the day, it was people was the main core, right? It's really, it can be your biggest challenge, your biggest asset, your biggest worry, your biggest leverage, everything, right? And then I think it's interesting what you say about asking for help, especially as you're building a network of people where you do need people to be willing to ask for help, right? Because that's why you join a network, is so that you can get the power of the structure and the connections and the mentorship. And so, but you've said something very particular, and having been in your network of investors for a year, that I do think entrepreneurs do need to get better at, is to ask for directed help and to be specific about it. Because I think when you're very specific, then people can very quickly respond and saying, oh, I can or I can't. And when you're a bit vaguer, then people are like, oh, I'm not sure if I know the right person or not. And I think that ability to ask for help in a concise manner and to know exactly what you need help with is difficult, right? It doesn't come naturally for people. And so you talk about, and especially as you talked about the people challenge, on the other end of it, or maybe just together, is technology, right? And you spoke a little bit. I love how you said you can build your own MVP in 2 hours. I do like to always bring that a little bit here, and it's new this season that I'm covering a little bit more of technology and AI. But I think we should, because there's so many mixed feelings about it, but you can't just not do it. And so I was wondering if you can share a little bit, as part of how you're building this business, are there tools you're bringing into the business? And, do some of them excite you? Do some of them scare you that you would care to share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, yesterday we were at one of the last sessions of our course called Zero to Builder, where we were helping some of these girls and guys, because we had both, to build AI agents, to improve their own product. And I think that's something that was just not there 5 years ago when I first jumped into entrepreneurship. I remember learning how to code in desperation within 3 months on my own online, because I was like, I can't build a technology product if I don't know how to code. I'm a business major for everyone listening. So I think the fact that technology has advanced so much, and that like having that technical skill is no longer like a big barrier, I think unlocks so many possibilities, for women to actually build large companies and have help while doing it. I think, like, I always remember there's this TikTok video that I saw that talked about like welcome to the era of mortals. And I really liked it because it mentioned that nowadays it's more important to have like business savviness, like understanding what your business model is, like understanding how to reach the right people through distribution and all of those, because you can build anything. And same goes for us. I mean, I'm not telling people that I'm building APIs. That's not the case with Amela. It's an irony that I love technology so much, but I'm not necessarily building a technology product. That being said, if we want to scale these network operations, we need to utilize technology to do that in a lean way, so that we can support more and more entrepreneurs, connect the people to the right people. Like we use like the usuals, right? Like ChatGPT, Canva, Figma, like Framer, like so many different tooling, that just makes our journey so much faster. Like for instance, if you talk to me. I'm like obsessed with CRMs. Atio, shout out. I really like how you can become more productive and how you can reach impact in a faster way. And I specifically also remember like the testimony of one of our Amelas, so like one of our members, who said, I used to hate technology. Like I was just so bad at it. But then I realized that for the impact I wanted to create, I needed to be able to amplify myself. I needed to be able to reach more people. And technology was going to be the way to do it. So therefore, I went for it. And I think even if you're building, let's say, a consumer brand and you're building like nowadays everyone's talking about the road acquisition, right? But road was only able to do what they did because they were going direct to consumer because they had this website where they were able to sell their products, and I'm sure like their whole supply chain was managed through technology, like their distribution, like so many things. So it's something that is just embedded in life, and I think instead of fearing it, we embrace it, and we're like super excited about the opportunity that this has to unlock more people to amplify themselves, to have a larger impact, and to get there faster.
So what are your plans for the future of Amela?
I mean, I think right now for us, it's important to reach as many women or aspiring entrepreneurs as possible, and to let them know that yes, they can go at it alone and like fall 20 times, but hopefully that if they choose to give themselves a chance, that they can do this through a network of support, like through and learn from other people and be able to find access. Like one of the things that I'm starting to see is that people are able to land into a different city and already know people through the network, right? Whether it's a mentor, whether it's a fellow member, whether it is like a speaker that at some point talked to us. So I think the plan for us next is to be able to reach more people, to be able to enlarge our scale, and to find better allies that can help us amplify this vision of the world that we have, where it's no longer about gender, but it's just about what opportunities do you see and how do we make those opportunities happen through business.
So we talked a bit about the business, but I always also like to talk about the CEO, right? And especially when you look through the span of your career, which you've had multiple experiences, can you look back and kind of see a common line in the way you've worked along the years?
Yeah, I think actually this is something that I've recently been aware of. I think I initially didn't necessarily know what a network was, and then later on realized how that could uplift my career. And so I've been able to tap into multiple networks. So for instance, I'm an MBA from INSEAD, and I know some people say, oh, should you even get an MBA or not? But that really did help me to meet the right people, to find the right connections, to be able to even like know what venture capital was or what fintech was. And I think it was specifically important for my career because I come from Peru, right? Like a place where all of these things are not necessarily available. And it's not the first time. Like I did it throughout my career without even realizing. Like I moved abroad when I was 17 to study in the Netherlands because I wanted to be able to reach different people. I've joined multiple networks of entrepreneurs, of fintech, of like people building with no code, like so many things. And I think that's something that I was not necessarily aware of before, but I think it was a really great way for me to shortcut my career. Like I love studying, and well, more than studying, I love learning. I've always been like a big believer of, hey, if I can learn, like I think it comes from curiosity, you know. If you're a curious person, you love learning, and then you upskill yourself and you do things and that.
And looking at as you're developing your team, what do you feel are the characteristics that define you as a leader?
I think I try to be certain whenever I say stuff. Like, no one can be 100% certain of anything, but I try to have an opinion. Because I think if you don't have an opinion, then people start wondering, you know, like you're not clear about what you're asking for. So I would say decisive in that sense. I would love to say that I'm an empathetic leader. I definitely believe that people need to work hard, but I also feel like there is a space for things, you know. Like if you work hard and suddenly you can tell me, hey, I actually have a haircut, and go get your haircut. As long as you tell me in advance, get your haircut. Or go to your mom's birthday celebration or whatever you need to do. So I try to lead with empathy. And then I think I'm someone who really likes to find, like, identify the things that people are good at and kind of continue to leverage on that. I think you probably heard this saying of, hey, don't try to make a fish fly or something like that. Like if you find that you have a fish, you send it to the water. You don't make it fly. And so I am very well aware that there are some people who are like good at some things, and then there are other things that they're not good at. And so I'm like, okay, is that thing that that person is excellent at what I really need to continue to build upon, or should I try to make them uh, con- so I try to help them develop the other skills. So I usually go for the first one. I try to make sure that they're really excellent at one thing.
And what do you feel is the most challenging part of your day job?
I think prioritizing, like, because I just have so many things. I think these days also like saying no to things. Like we're in the lucky position where so many people propose so many things, and I think the topic that we solve for, which is like closing that gender gap through entrepreneurship, is something that people can really vibe with. But I know that it's important for me to choose mindfully what things we commit ourselves to, because otherwise we're just going to get strained on all the 20 things that people propose. So it's prioritizing, it's making sure that we just choose a few things to work on. Yeah.
And looking, and I think you've started talking about a few lessons along the podcast. What do you feel has been the most significant leadership lesson that you've learned in this journey?
I think it's important to know why you do what you do. Like that is something that I think a lot of people are not necessarily aware of, and I myself wasn't aware of when I first started Amela, because I don't know if I fully mentioned this at this podcast, but like I didn't set myself to start this. I kind of found myself in an interesting position and said, oh, why not? But then throughout the journey, I could have like, stumbled and say, okay, it's too hard. Let me just leave. And I started to explore further. Why am I doing this? Why does this matter so much to me? Why do I care so much? And I think it was the moment where I could identify why does this matter so much to me, that I realized I could have the resilience to continue doing it. So I think it's important that people realize why they do what they do. And because the world can be so crowded with so many opinions and so many things, it's really easy to lose yourself and to just go along the playbook. Like, for instance, I love my time in consulting, but there was a time after 5 years where I realized I was just doing the things that people asked me to do, to jump over another hill, to get all of those right checks. And it wasn't fulfilling to me anymore. It wasn't something that really represented my why. Like I ended up joining consulting initially because I wanted to learn about multiple industries so that later on I could choose on what industry I would start a company. In that sense, I ended up learning more of financial services. And then I thought, okay, I'll start something in financial services. But at some point, like I forgot that was the reason why I was doing all of it. So I think it's important to sometimes just take some time to remember the why.
Yeah, I think the purpose is something that we kind of think that's something I'll do when I'm older, and that's something I'll think about when I retire, but actually more and more, the more you actually define or take the time to investigate a little bit, what is my purpose and what is it why am I even doing this? Do I even remember, like you said, do I even remember why I started in this journey? It does help, because it's no one is here to claim that an entrepreneurial journey is easy. And so having that sense and having that in mind is always a little bit of a barometer of bringing you back and finding your north again, because it is very easy to lose your north when you're in the middle of managing 25 tasks and MVPs and getting clients and doing this and feel like, you're underwater. But with the knowing you have a north is probably the key. But not everybody defines that before setting up a business. I think sometimes people jump on the business very fast. And so I think we started moving a little bit into the more of the inside of Anais. What does a good day look like for you?
Actually, someone just asked me about that. Like, well, not now, but like not too long ago, my coach asked me about it. I just started with a coach. What does a perfect day look like for Anais? I was like, I think a perfect day is like I get up, I have my coffee, I love coffee, and then I go for a walk, I go to my barre or Pilates class. I really like that. I think it helps me like get some thoughts out, and then I come back. I start by answering emails. I have a few calls with some entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. I think the most beautiful part of that is people usually tell me their dreams. You know, like they tell me, oh, I've been doing all of these things. Like, I remember last week someone literally pulled a blog note and said, these are all the notes I've been taking about all of these things that I want to do, but I haven't done it. And I was like, why do you keep on writing them on a booklet? Go ahead and do it. But I think it's beautiful that like people tell me their actual dreams. And then afterwards, I usually have a catch up with my team, depending on like whether it's one person on my team or like the whole team. And then we get to work, you know, we get to talk to multiple entities, potential partnerships. That's what gives me like a lot of really great vibes. Like I feel happy serving others. I think that's our business, the business of serving others and supporting them. Usually if I get a testimonial, it makes my day. Like, I think yesterday there was another founder who was like, oh, I just closed my 75K, like the first week of fundraising. And I was like, oh, so great. Like, thank you so much for sharing that. Or someone who told me, oh, I had this really insightful meeting with a mentor. Or like those things really do make our days. And we have like a small channel which we call wins and boosts. So we share like the things that are not great that happen, and then we say, okay, maybe we need to change this or that. But we also share like a lot of love testimonials so that we like find that sense of purpose again and again. And then like obviously I also like to have a life. So if I'm able to have some time to hang out with my boyfriend, maybe watch a movie or a series, cook together, like I also really like that. I actually like cooking quite a bit. Because I think it helps me do something with my hands. I'm usually doing something with my head, but sometimes going back to the body can really help. So I love doing that. And then I have a great relationship with my family. So I mean, I don't call my mom every day, but every once in a while I do call her, and then we chat about business or we chat about life. And that's also something that really gives me joy.
That looks like a very long day, Anais, but I'm going to go with it. And,
I have a lot
imagine
of
that your
energy. I've
dream
always
day
had a lot of
is
energy.
possible every day. So I think you've alluded a little bit to it, and how even in the beginning, how do you feel like you are able to really create and protect space for yourself and to re-energize? And you spoke a little bit about the cooking and the Pilates, but a lot of times people know what they like to do, but they feel like, oh, I can't, or I have this team, or I have this deliverable. How do you make sure that you create that space?
I search for accountability buddies, you know, as bad as it sounds, because I think you can have a lot of like willingness to do something, but sometimes it's still hard to do it. So big accountability buddy is my boyfriend. He is like, okay, if you're not sleeping at 11:30, we are not good. Sleep. So that makes sure that I do sleep. In terms of like doing exercise or doing stuff, like I have friends or I sometimes post it online because that just helps me make sure it's not for people, it's actually for me. So I'm like, okay, check, done. Like I also tell my team sometimes when I need to do stuff. So yeah, I think having accountability buddies can really help make sure that it's not just you taking care of yourself, but kind of people remind you. Like it's not like anyone's gonna come with a knife and be like, you have to do this. But it helps having some people who say, hey, have you done that?
Yeah, for sure. And so, big question. What advice would you give to your younger self starting your career?
That's a good idea. That's a good question. I think my young self was very stressed. Like, I've always been an overachiever. I wouldn't necessarily tell her to relax and trust that everything's gonna be fine. I'd say just continue doing what you're doing and maybe ask for help a little bit more often. Because I used to be like very like self-sufficient. Like that was like my bigger problem for my first business. I thought I could do it all on my own, and I didn't really ask for help. And then when I realized that I could tap into entrepreneurial networks and actually get help, I just felt like the journey could be a lot easier. So I think, and then the other thing is, I think there's this misconception of entrepreneurship being incredibly risky. Entrepreneurship is risky, 100%, but I do think people tend to think about it, especially women, as riskier than it is. I love this phrase that says, choose your heart. And I think everything in life is hard. Like whether it is starting a business that is just, I don't know, a bakery shop or a restaurant. Like restaurants are so competitive. Or starting a technology business. Like everything is gonna be hard, but I think it depends on like what type of life you wanna craft for yourself. And I think entrepreneurship or what is attractive to me on that side is that it can help you shape your own path. I don't necessarily encourage absolutely everyone to become an entrepreneur, but I think if you never try, you never know. And a lot of people just get paralyzed by the fear of seeing it as this super duper risky cliff. But being able to approach networks like us can give you a very close look into it without having to go through a journey yourself. And then at some point making that decision of, hey, I actually do want to take the leap. But by now, I know already these many people who have done it. I've seen a few people fall, and now I will fall, but I will fall slightly less. So yeah, I think maybe I would have pushed myself to start things a little bit faster instead of just over calculating it
But
beforehand.
asking for help.
Yeah, and asking for help. Yeah.
So let's finish off with a quick firing round with three questions for that we can leave as recommendations from you. What book would you like to share with us that you've read, that you're reading, that has impressed you? Let's try and go with one because I know you said you love reading.
Yeah, I'd
What
say the
would you
hard thing
say?
about hard things. I feel like this is probably one of the most recommended books, but I really like that it takes you through a roller coaster of entrepreneurship and you realize that you can always figure it out one way or another.
And what about, is there a quote that particularly inspires you or that you remind yourself often that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I'm trying to think about it. Right now, I think it would just be this choose your heart. Maybe it's just because I'm currently thinking, okay, I do see a lot of people doing incredibly hard things, but not necessarily choosing them for themselves. So I would just stick to that one for now.
And finally, did you pick a word of the year for 2025?
Maybe I pick joy. Because I think sometimes I forget to enjoy the process of everything I'm doing. And there is a lot of really great things that I get to do on daily basis and a lot of wonderful people that I meet. But if I just get in my head and I'm just like, "Oh, I need to hustle, I forget to enjoy it." So I think joy maybe is a really good word to keep for this year.
I think that's a wonderful and joyful way to finish the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate your time. And it was lovely to hear about the journey and hopefully to inspire many others to evaluate and to give it a go or to do it in a different way when they're in this journey of entrepreneurship. Thanks for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I really enjoyed having Anais at the podcast today. She comes to remind us that entrepreneurship is a path to be experimented with, a path that comes with challenges and big emotions, but also one that can be made easier if we are willing to ask for help and to reach out to the power of networks. Through Amela, she is enabling more aspiring and scaling entrepreneurs to use a network. And through her personal energy, she is pushing the company further to help more people every day. After we stopped recording, we spent a long time chatting about business, the podcast, and she naturally offered multiple opportunities for introductions and ideas. Enabling businesses is part of her DNA, and it is amazing to see your company grow alongside it. What was your favorite part of the podcast? What were your main lessons? Share your comments and lessons, and don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. That helps more people get inspired by these conversations. Thank you for listening to the Make Space for Growth podcast. And until we meet again, I get to do this.